Somebody at Cherry said, do you know Rob Rosen? And I was very surprised after finding out about him that I did not know of him. So I call him up, and it took him 50, maybe 75 microseconds to get back to me. And he goes, I got a guy. And boom.
I was the guy.
You were the guy. Yeah, it was instantaneous. I think from the time that I contacted him, you had it 2 days later. You guys showed up at 10 o'clock, and my son and I unstacked it from the living room. We brought it out to my driveway and set it up so that when the truck pulled up, the headlights would be shining right at it.
You staged that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's so crazy.
That would be the thing you saw when you pulled the truck up.
And it was, but like,
it was, yeah.
The thing that we saw was surreal, because who would do this? Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a true pioneer in the world of electronic music and synthesis, Mark Barton. Mark's career is a remarkable journey through the realm of groundbreaking technology and innovation. His impact on modular synthesis technology is nothing short of legendary. And Mark's unique creations include the Syndrum, heard in many hit records, and in 1980, he designed SAM, which stands for Software Automatic Mouth, the first text-to-speech system to run independently on a microcomputer. This trailblazing work caught the attention of Steve Jobs, which led to the development of Macintalk for the first original Macintosh, and Mark's contributions extend to modern modular synthesis as well. His 2005 design, the Zero Oscillator, was the first commercial through-zero FM VCO and is now available in software form for voltage modular users. And I have to mention he crafted his first hardware synthesizer in 1973. Now I can't wait for you to hear how I met Mark, the historic background story of the most famous modular synth, the Plantasia Moog Modular 3C, and the path that brought it to me. And be sure to watch Alex Ball's masterful documentary video titled The Plantasia Synth. I'll put the link in the description for you, so enjoy this video. So tell us about what you know about the origin of this Moog 3C, like this, how it was made, because it was originally made for Mort Garson, right? Let's go all the way back to the beginning, and then how you found out about Moog synthesizers, and what that felt like when you first heard them, and then how you maybe found Mort the first time, and then later, and all the way down the line, and how you're here.
All righty then. I was classically trained pianist since the age of 4.5. And when the Beatles showed up on Ed Sullivan, now I'm rock and roll, to much to the dismay of my parents. And switched on Bach from Wendy Carlos got me back into classical music in a big way, because it was a whole fresh, just ear candy, and Bach, of course, the ideal composer to use to do that. I played Switched on Bach. I played the album so many times. I played it till you could see through it. I mean, it was through the record. It was so worn. And also the second album, Well-Tempered Synthesizer. And I would stare at that album cover, at that blurry picture of that Moog 3P, and I'm going, what is this? What is this? What is this? And I was always into electronics, like since the age of 7. I was building electronics projects. And so just for my whole life, electronics and music, this was just, in the same brain. So,
quick aside.
Yes.
This is a 3C,
yes,
which means cabinet.
Cabinet.
Mark mentioned 3P, which means portable. So when you see the Moogs in the black cabinet, now you know the difference.
Like a chemistry set, like that.
They're set up like that,
right.
Same components.
Mm-hmm. One day I see an ad someplace that this guy named Mort Garson, who knew who this guy is, I didn't know, and was going to give a concert in Century City, which is a shopping and office area in West Los Angeles. He was going to give an outdoor concert on a Moog synthesizer. I went, I get to see one. I get to go and see one. So a friend and I go to the concert, and he plays a few things, and he's miming. He's playing the keyboard, and he's twisting knobs, but there's a tape playing of a whole multi-track performance, something, because who can give a concert on, how can one person give a concert on a monophonic synth and be interesting? So he was just, it was very funny. I knew that this is what was going on, because I knew you could only play one note. I knew a little bit. And after the concert was over, went up to him and said, can we visit you in your studio, and can you take us on a tour, show us how this works? because I didn't know about voltage control. There was no information. There was obviously no internet. This is 1970 or 71. This is happening.
So he had it for a year or two.
Yeah, just about.
He bought it in 69.
He bought it in 69. Is it one serial number after the Beatles?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's one serial number after the Beatles, and it was one of the earliest systems.
One of the earliest ones, and so he very begrudgingly said yes. I could tell he didn't want us to visit him. Two kids coming, maybe I'm 17. And so he says, yeah, come on over, I'll show you. So he hands us his business card. We arrange a date and time. We go over. He lived in a house in Beverly Hills, and he had a back house, which was his studio. So we go there, and he is dressed in a Hawaiian shirt with a gold pentagram around his neck and his big mustache. I'm going, what is this about? And so you want to demonstrate what he did? And we fell on the floor. We thought it was the best thing ever. And then he kicked us out. So he did that, and we fell on the floor. It was like something like a sound effect out of the original Outer Limits series. Thought it was just the coolest thing. And then after he did that, it took him about 20 seconds. He goes, goodbye. So we never got the demo, never got an explanation, never got anything.
So you got to hear white noise in a fixed filter bank.
I got to hear white noise coming through a fixed filter bank, which was exciting enough. I guess it was worthwhile going because the whole time I'm reading the panel, which I couldn't do on any album cover. I'm reading.
Did it make sense to you?
No. Oscillator, 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 oscillator. What's with this?
Yeah.
Why do you need so many oscillators? What do they do? Because to me, an oscillator was a piece of test equipment. You turn it on and boom, you get a test frequency. I didn't know, why do you need all these oscillators?
Mixer?
Mixer I understood. Didn't know what an envelope generator was.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything.
Even a filter, nobody dealt with that.
Right. So I came to learn all of that when I went to UCLA. There was an electronic music lab, and they had a 3P and a Buchla, a synthesizer, and Jim Cooper of Jim Cooper Electronics, or would become Jim Cooper Electronics. Also, he's a co-designer of the Oberheim SEM as well. He was the caretaker of that lab, and I used to bother him, and he wasn't pleased with me either. And I would bother him, could I please borrow the schematics? He goes, the schematics must not leave this room. Finally.
He gave them to you.
Finally, he gives them to me. I go, I'm just going to the copy room. I'm going to copy them, and I'll bring them right back. He trusted me. He did not want to give them to me. But I got them, and I studied those things. And by then, more information was coming out. A newsletter called Electro Notes from Bernie Hutchins, fantastic resource. That was, that changed my world, that newsletter. And I built my own modular system in 73. And I used it in our Emerson, Lake and Palmer cover band with
But wait,
with my brother.
I want to hear all about that, but it didn't take you long.
No,
you just first introduced from Mort, what is it, you said in 70, 71?
In 70, so I wasn't quite out of high school. So
within 2-3 years? You're building one.
Yeah.
And you didn't know what an oscillator was.
Right, yeah.
Remarkable.
But, so, I mean, I was just a sponge. It just, everything, you know. All right, yeah, so I used my synthesizer in an Emerson, Lake and Palmer cover band, and Keith actually heard some recordings. We actually became friends. We used to pal around and stuff. And
wait a second. So you had a cover band. So you were listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer
a lot. Yeah.
And that's the early Emerson, Lake and Palmer too.
Right.
By the time you had a cover band, it was only early 70s. So, and then you were like learning the songs and playing it on your synthesizer that you made.
Yeah, on a Hammond organ and my synthesizer.
And your own synthesizer.
Right. The synthesizer, it had 4 VCOs, 4 envelope generators, a 4-pole filter, 2-pole filter, sample and hold, ring modulator.
Wow. You built all those modules?
$600.
Do you have any recordings of it?
I have recordings of the band.
And are you playing that synthesizer? I'd love to hear that.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's history.
I got that. We played the Troubadour. We played around town and stuff.
With bass and drums?
Bass was my brother. Actually, at one point, to do what they did, we had 5 people.
Because you needed a singer and
a
guitar player.
We had a singer and we had a guitar player for a while.
All separate.
Yeah, all separate.
Because Greg Blake was pretty much a prodigy.
Yeah, well, just adored that band.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Right.
So then so you were doing that, and then how did you hook up with Keith?
Well, that actually comes after I acquire this. So we'll get to that in order, I guess. Fast forward to about 1987 or 88. There was a magazine, classified ad magazine in LA called The Recycler. Came out on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
So I would always look in the used instruments section, and I see this ad, and it says Moog Model 3C, $900 or best offer. And I'm going, or best offer? A 3C. Okay, this is a typo. Either it's not a 3 or there's a 0 missing off the price. In any event, this is Thursday. It's gone because the paper comes out on Wednesday. So I call up. Yes, it's a 3. Yes, it's $900. And he still got it. Boom, 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 boom. Okay.
Drive fast.
Yes. I scraped together the $900, don't remember how. Put it in my girlfriend, now my wife, in her boot, because we're going to a really seedy part of downtown Los Angeles, to an upstairs loft. You could barely see how to walk through it. It was so dimly lit. And here's this thing, and it was on, and the guy is playing boom, 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 boom. He's playing like mini Moog bass sounds on it. And I look at it, and I go, why are you selling this? And he goes, well, this is all I really do with it. I just really need a mini, and this thing is so huge. And I'm looking at it, and I go, this looks really familiar to me. And I go, do you know who this used to belong to? And the guy says, yeah, I think it belonged to a guy named Mort Garson. I went, oh my God, this is the synthesizer I visited when I was 17.
Did he say how he got it from Mort?
He did not. If he did, I don't remember. But I went, oh my God, I visited this when I was a kid, and now it's mine.
Incredible. He certainly couldn't have paid like $9,000 or anything for it, because
you couldn't give away analog at the time.
You probably wouldn't be selling it.
You couldn't. It was
in the mid '80s.
It was DX7 land.
People were getting rid of their great sounding stuff.
Right. Yeah. No, analog was trash. Analog synths were literally trash. You could pick it up for nothing. And when I bought it and when I paid what I did for it, I went, oh, the fool. He doesn't know what he just sold. And so then I've had it for the next 38 years. I've owned it. And
did you use that in the band instead, or just
no? Mine was much more portable than.
And so you took this home.
Took it home. Became a living room fixture more than anything else. It was working in our living room a lot. At our last house, we even bought black furniture with silver stripes to match it because it's so beautiful. I always love the way they look. And and then I kind of stopped using it. But I still loved it. I loved having it for what it was, what it represented, throughout my history and just the history of electronic music in general.
What did it represent for you?
Well, just everything I love about the electronic music medium.
All the way back to like Walter Carlos,
all the way back to
John Bach. What made you?
All the way back to Forbidden Planet. That's where it all began for me.
And so, how did you find Keith?
So. There was a guy, his name's Will Alexander. A lot of people might know that name. He was Keith's roadie, technician, confidant, caretaker. He was everything. And he calls me up one day and he goes, in his Texas accent, he goes, you want Keith for the day? Like that. I go, what? Yeah, he wants to go out on a boat. You got a friend with a boat, right? I go, yeah. So I call my friend Roger. I go, Keith Emerson wants to go sailing. You will accommodate me. So we went out. And Marina Del Rey took him sailing, and while we had him captive in the middle of the ocean, we played him a tape of our band. And he's going, oh, where'd you get the bootleg? I go, that's not a bootleg, that's us. He goes, that's you guys? And then his head went down like this, and he just stared at the deck, listening. And he looked up at us, and he goes, wow, you guys really listen. And we were friends. We'd go out to dinner. One night, we went out to dinner. He would always pay. He was generous, funny. He was just the best company. Millions of stories from off the road. I love being with him. I mean, this is my idol. This is my number one musical idol, and I'm friends with him. And it was like, I couldn't believe it the whole time. So anyway, we go back to my house, and there's the Moog on top of a Hammond organ.
He didn't know you had it?
No, he didn't know I had it. There's the Moog on top of a Hammond organ. That's a Keith Emerson shrine, is what that is, right? And he walks in, and he looks at it, and he goes, does everybody have one of these? And that was his first remark. He didn't realize what he was looking at, that it was a shrine. And we played duets. I played organ. He played piano, and that was really, really a great evening. So yeah, we remained friends, and really, really miss him a lot.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Did you play ELP songs too?
Yes, we duetted ELP stuff.
So you had the nerve to do that.
I've done it with him a number of times. Yeah.
Which ones?
Tarkus, and I don't know, maybe parts of Trilogy.
So you had those ready to go in your hands, and
I still do.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we had 90 minutes of ELP material that we could perform, and that was a labor of love. And we loved that. I mean, every rehearsal was a great time. So, the reason I mentioned Will is because he would come to all of our rehearsals, even before, years before he was associated with Keith. He loved Emerson Palmer music so much that he was a fixture at our rehearsals. And that's how I became friends with him.
That says a lot. He's hearing the real thing every day.
Yeah.
And so then you had it after the Keith period. Then what was going on with the 3C?
Really, not much. Not much. Like I say, it was living room art. Is
From when?
Probably early 90s.
So from the 90s until I came along?
Yeah. Well, I got the idea. It's like, this really should go, I'm selling everything. I'm in that selling mode of all the analog stuff. And I always ask the question, when are you going to sell the Moog? And my answer was always never. But then I realized, why am I holding on to it?
Maybe you made that list of analog and digital?
Well, that happened years before that, but it's like, it was realistically, what am I doing with it? Somebody who's going to use it, and put it to good use, and I'm thrilled that it wound up with you. I'm absolutely overjoyed. There were other places.
So glad to hear that.
Yeah, there were other places that were candidates, but they just would have wound up on a shelf in a museum or something and not used.
It means so much to me, and I number the oscillators, so I know them like their personalities. And Rob Rosen and I have been working on it, like bringing it up to spec. I mean, Rob does the work on it, but I'm able to tell him, well, this oscillator is a little better than this one, and it does this. And I keep log on it, and it's like right now it's a little bit like a patient, but it's past that point now. Rob's really got it dialed up.
All right, so we've got these power supplies wired in. They're not mounted in, but they're wired in. And we have one bank of 921s going here. So you want to do the honors and give it a shot, see if we get sound.
The honors is pushing the go button. Sounds like an oscillator. Ooh, sounds like a Moog oscillator.
What note is that? A220. There you go.
Had to do that. Nice thin, raw rectangle wave. Let's hear that sawtooth again. Triangle. It's a beauty.
There we go.
Jumping in here to remind you to like and subscribe. Please push that button. I've noticed that 75% of you haven't subscribed to the channel, and we want to keep bringing these videos to you, and it's the one thing we need your help to do, to give back to us, and we can keep giving back to you guys. So looking forward to hearing your comments about this and more. Now back to the video. I just want you to know it's in a great home, and we're just at the beginning stages of the kind of music. It's fully relevant to me today, working on it, and also bringing it, because I know you don't just abandon old instruments, especially ones that are this important, for people to understand the evolution and have appreciation for, like, not only where we're going, but where we came from.
That's why I kept it. It really was. It's like somebody keeps a classic car in a garage and hardly ever drives it. You know, it was really that's how I, you know, for the nostalgia value, and it's just it's historical perspective for me is why I kept it so long. The way you wound up with it is I was putting out feelers. It's like, who might want this? Contacted Michelle Moog for a while. Hi, Michelle. And for her to maybe to try to place it, and then I called. Anyway, somebody at Cherry said, do you know Rob Rosen? And I was very surprised after finding out about him that I did not know of him. So he goes, yeah, he might be able to place it. He buys and sells synths like that. So I call him up, and I send him an email with pictures. And it took him 50, maybe 75 microseconds to get back to me. And he goes, I got a guy. And boom.
I was the guy.
You were the guy. Yeah, it was instantaneous. I think from the time that I contacted him, you had it 2 days later. It was that fast.
And then we were on the night of the supermoon.
Right.
It was very surreal for me. And by the time it all ended, it was midnight. You know, it was just...
Yeah, you guys showed up at 10 o'clock. And my son and I unstacked it from the living room. We brought it out to my driveway and set it up so that when the truck pulled up, the headlights would be shining right at it.
You staged that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That's so crazy.
That would be the thing you saw when you pulled the truck up.
And it was, but like,
it was, yeah.
The thing that we saw was surreal because I think who would do this? Put a Moog 3C, you know, like in the middle of the driveway, and it was kind of lit by the moon too.
Right, moon and headlights, yeah.
Yeah, and then we killed the headlights, our eyes kind of adjusted, and then it just had this beautiful moonlight glow. It's you mentioned the black and silver, you know, and the silver had a, you know, and it's so surreal because it was also used on the moon landing by Mort Garson, and I had known that. Right. So I'm coming in of like the moon and the moon was like up high in the sky because it was so late at night. You know, full moon comes up.
All very poetic.
With the sun goes down, and it just seemed all like the right cycle of things. And it's like it's going to the next place, and hopefully it's going to go on forever. I mean forever, but for the next generation, I want to pass it on to my family, and it's going to be. We'll see. We want to make music on it. We want to keep it relevant. So it's really important.
Yeah.
It's a crown jewel.
I await what is to come. I'm sure it'll be great.
Well, so I think we've both, you know, we probably both really admire the work of Mort Garson. I didn't even know too much about Mort Garson until I, you know, got this synthesizer from you. And then I started looking into, like, I wanted to know, like, well, what was it used on? And it just shocked me, like, how much amazing work he did on it. Like, music that he wrote for it, that includes Plantasia and the moon landing, and then all his other, like, works that he wrote just for the Moog that were all electronic, but then also him as a composer writing film music, lots of TV commercials, even game shows, 7 game shows. I mean, he was all over the place, and as an arranger, and then even a pop song.
Yeah, he had
incredible musician.
Absolutely, very, very talented guy, and seemed to get the synthesizer. He didn't have a programmer. Some people had separate programmers to do stuff for him, but he did it all himself, so he definitely understood it.
For a composer of that generation, because when I got my early start, I was programming for composers of that generation. You know, and I got my ARP 2600 from Jerry Goldsmith. He was one of the few.
My favorite film composer.
It was fresh off Logan's Run. It was used on Logan's Run, and then he got an ARP 2500. But he was one of the few that really knew it and could program on it, knew his way around it.
Right. So and he had this whole line of occult albums. You know,
this is Mort now.
Mort, yeah. Black Mass Lucifer, and then he had, I think we have the jacket up there, Ataraxia, Music for the Occult or whatever it's called.
Well, these are his handles too. He would go by these names.
Yes. And like I said, he had the Hawaiian shirt with the gold pentagram around his neck. I don't think he was a devil worshiper, but I think he was just trying to be edgy or something. I never talked to him about it. I have no idea where all that influence came from. He also did a series of 12 albums, 1 album per zodiac sign. And the title is each zodiac sign for each album. And Christina Applegate's mother is the narrator on all these records, and they are corny but a lot of fun.
I want to hear those.
If you can find those. And there's also, I think, an album that has all 12 signs, like as a collection on a single album. Yeah, and people really gravitated towards the Plantasia record. It's a very fun, very lyrical, happy album. I guess happy is the best adjective for it.
Yeah, and he wrote it for his wife. She was fond of plants, right?
Music for plants. So that album was recently re-released. And my good friend Gene Stopp, the late Gene Stopp, unfortunately, who was the guy who was behind, like 100% behind restoring Keith Emerson's Moog, which I also helped with, and recreating the Moog modular line for Moog again.
For the reissues.
So the idea was, he was the caretaker of Emerson's Moog, and the thought occurred to him, what would happen if a module went out? We have no spares. We have no nothing. If something happened, on the road, what? And so he goes, well, we could recreate we could make one of these. We could make one of these, and all of a sudden it just blew up, and it became a whole reissued line of modulars, and that was all his doing.
Well, Mort Garson was quite an interesting character, and I wonder how he decided, as much as he gravitated towards the Moog, what do you think made him gravitate away from the Moog and
that I don't know.
Move it?
That I don't know. So Plantasia, as it relates to this, when the album came out, the re-release came out, Gene was working at Moog, and they asked him, do you know what the complement of modules was in Mort's synth? And he said, I not only know what it was, I know where it is. Because,
Oh, they came to you.
He knew I had it.
Was this modeled, did they use this as a model for the reissues?
No, well, this was the synth used for Plantasia.
I know that,
Yeah,
but when they were making, is that what you're saying, when Gene was making the reissues for Moog, that he came back and looked at this?
No, he didn't. No, it was the standard models, the standard 3C and the 55. They recreated those because this has a unique complement of modules.
Right.
But they wanted it for a display. So when they found out, that Gene knew where it was, they built big wooden crates and sent the crates out here, and it got shipped off to the East Coast. And I was nervous the entire time that this happened, and it was insured for a ridiculous amount of money. And it was on display at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. If you go to the Moog website and look up in their past news articles.
Not so long ago, really.
You can see it. It was displayed there for the re-release.
Just before the COVID pandemic, right? A few years before. And then it came back, and then back to your house, and it was all in pretty good shape, more or less.
More or less, yeah.
Traveled all the way there. But yeah, it was just on display as a symbol of what was classic instrument.
See, other encounters that this has had. In the 90s, Bob Moog came out to LA, and he did a show. He was hawking theremins, and this was at the Hollywood Athletic Club. And there was a band playing, and there was this girl that played bass theremin in a band. It worked. For some reason, it just worked. It was really surprising that you could go boom, boom, boom on a theremin and as a bass player. But and then he talked and everything between sets, and I knew he was going to go there. So I bring every Moog album I have. I bring my Moog theremin. I bring the second tier of this cabinet with me.
Ooh, this is an important thing.
In the car. And I catch him between sets, and I go, can you sign this? And I had him sign it on the cabinet. He goes, where do you want it? I go, right above the filter. So,
and he does it all big like that.
Yeah, real big, and he signed it. And he signed all my albums. He signed my theremin. He was very generous with that. And we talked shop, we talked circuits and stuff, and that was a great time. I've had encounters with him over the years at various events. So I asked him, he asked me, do you know whose this was? I said it was Mort Garson's. And he said, this is the first synthesizer delivered to Los Angeles. I think I drove this out here myself. So he
From the East Coast?
From the East Coast. He told me that. He wasn't 100% sure, that this was like 92, something like that this was happening. So in 1969, he recalls driving this out to Mort himself.
Were you influenced by Mort's music too, or it was
Not
mainly
really.
Wendy Carlos?
Wendy
And Keith Emerson. Those are
Keith Emerson.
Those are the two.
Yeah, I mean, I am Keith Emerson. There's so much. I got so much of my style is really him that I've absorbed. So influenced. Not really influenced. I like them all. I'll listen to them all the time. I listen to Switch on Bach regularly. I think it's still. I think it's one of the best electronic music albums ever, and it still is.
And the sounds?
The sounds are fantastic.
Do you make them on digital?
You can.
You can.
You can. I authored all of the entire 900 series of modules, and
she had a very special ability. Yes. Creating sounds and also
a lot of work
interpreting.
More work than people usually put into making a sound. I think people are more into the rhythm and the impact and whatever than the tone color, trying to do imitative synthesis or trying to make a really interesting tone.
Right. Well, there were no presets, and it was just like you had. See, that's one of the things when you have to do it, when you can't just call up a preset, then you're kind of forced to make it good. I mean, because if you just don't spend enough time, it's kind of not so flavorful.
Right.
So then you start getting into the nuances, and then it's it's a unique sound, and then you tear it apart and you come up with another unique sound. And then she would layer them, and then the hocketing, where you change tone color on the same line.
Right.
Which was a technique of the Renaissance, where they would do that with, and sometimes and actually she was doing that too because they didn't have stereo in the Renaissance, but they did. In Venetian polychoral music, they would position the same instruments on both sides of mostly in the church. They'd have a pipe organ in the middle, a choir on one side, a choir on the other, and then brass on both sides. So they could send in the middle of a melody, bounce things back and forth. And they would do that with all the woodwind instruments. And that was one of the things that really blew me away, was having color changes in the middle of a line.
Right, sometimes every other note.
Yeah.
In some of them, or every two
and then
notes.
Bouncing it in the stereo field.
Right.
And I couldn't do that on piano. Like these things caught my ear. And I thought, well, I need a synthesizer to do this.
Right. And even you can't do it on most synthesizers. Wendy had a special keyboard made by Bob that would alternate. You press down and you get a note, and then the next time you'd get a different sound. So every other time you hit the keyboard, you would
send a different gate and trigger.
It would alternate
so
what you heard.
That.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And that was supposed to imitate the up and down bowing technique.
Oh, to get down and ups. Oh, that's pretty handy actually. You don't have to do it. I used to do it with two. I had two keyboards on my 2600 to do that. And at the same time, I could do that. Rob Rosen told me that this bottom keyboard is a Velocity keyboard, and it was one of only two that Bob Moog made.
Really? Did he get it to work?
It's
getting there?
It's working now.
Oh, okay.
You think it's velocity sensitive?
Has to be. There's no reason why it would have this.
We're getting the velocity to work soon, but it's working on pitch. We're going to get everything working.
Okay.
It's just step by step. So it's part of the refurbishing. Rob Rosen from Rosen Sound is on this thing every couple weeks. We get together and we pull a module out, and I give him a description of what I think is the next step, like what I'm noticing about the oscillators, and he'll say, he stopped saying user error now because he knows that I'm pretty good at knowing what's going on with the synthesizers, and I keep really good notes. That's something, I think is important to do as a musician. Keep notes of things that you want to remember, because it's hard to remember everything.
Right. Wendy had her version of presets, and you can see them on her website if they're still up there. She would document sounds. There's freehand drawings of the modules and the patch chords and the numbers, because every knob on a Moog has got
numbers.
Has numbers, with voltages or time constants, and write down where every knob was, and so if she needed a sound back.
I do that sometimes, but I just mostly use my ear. I don't really use patch sheets to do it. But I do document the behavior of the stuff, because then for me, I don't want to go to an oscillator when I know it's screwing up, if it's like going to screw up on me or something. So then I keep that on my notes. I go, oh, this thing doesn't track in the high range, So And then I kind of have that in my head, and then I get it fixed, and then I cross it out, but I leave it crossed out so I can know that that oscillator did have that problem. These are all my little tricks, but I guess I'm more intimately involved with oscillators and like a synthesizer modules maybe than most musicians, but it matters to me, you know, on certain instruments. I kind of keep track of it. But do you know anybody that since then has been putting that much care into every sound and every note, from, like, you know, Keith Emerson? I'd say his primary strength was the composition and the performance.
Oh,
right?
definitely, yeah.
And the sounds were great. They were powerful, and they were very functional. They, like even when he would play like expressive vocal, wah wah wah, you know, like the Tarkus solo, that kind of sound. Different than Wendy Carlos, it was more about precision and articulation, right, and orchestration, right, big time. Multiple layers of sounds, right. And we mentioned Tomita earlier, like when we were talking. What? That's a long time ago now.
It is a long time ago.
What's happened there?
I don't think the emphasis is on that anymore.
Why? When you have the greatest ability of all, and especially with you with digital, and we can make any sound, and then no one's doing it.
Nobody's doing it.
What happened?
I don't know. I'm going to say something mean. If I hear one more time, I'm going to kill myself. Because that's what people do with synthesizers. You know, the sequencer goes, you hear the same 8 notes go by, and the filter opens, and they love it, and it's a wonderful sound. But I've heard it. I'm sure you've heard it.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to go, oh, I'm going to try to make, the best, the best flute I can with all the articulation and stuff. Because you got samples you can go to. There's now physical modeling synthesizers out, which are phenomenal.
They sure are.
That sound amazing. But not everybody goes and gets a synthesis education. People used to go to school to learn how to use this. So you can't really put it on a beginner or somebody who just, the technology is so accessible. There's so much free stuff. I mean, there's a sin of gluttony on, that's huge.
I know. Well, maybe memory and presets kind of killed the creativity to a certain
I'll tell you
extent.
something else that I thought of just about a year ago. What killed it? The Mini Moog killed it. Because the Mini Moog codified that patch. Oscillators, mixer, filter, amplifier, envelope.
Yeah.
That's a synthesizer.
Right.
And so even when people come up to something like this, it's the first thing they do. Whereas there's a myriad of other ways that you can patch something to get an interesting sound.
Yeah.
And I think that just took the whole space and just went shoo, like that, and this is what you do with a synthesizer. So every synth that came out after that has that architecture.
Right.
And it's very useful. You can get a lot of sounds out of it, but it's by far not the only thing you can do.
And even within that,
so there was no evil intent, but I think that's kind of just what happened.
Yeah, I find that remarkable though, with the levels of opportunity that you have now. I don't see anyone building those kinds of textures. I mean, I could throw a few others in there, Jean-Michel Jarre, Tangerine Dream, Vangelis, the work with Stevie Wonder, Robert Margouleff, and Malcolm Cecil. I just didn't want to leave them out because they used the monophonic keyboard to create, the chords and things, and Stevie would play the nuance of like each woodwind player, for instance, if they were doing a 2 or 3 part little counterline or something like that. So I didn't want to leave them out because I think, you know how great that stuff is.
I love that stuff. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Then again, that's still a long time ago.
It is. There's a lot of interesting sounds, nothing like what we've just discussed, showing up in EDM music, generally very aggressive, grindy, electric stuff.
I do
you
like it.
You may like it or not like it, but it is new, and those are new textures. And they're exclusively
I agree with you.
Digital.
I think that more than counts, and I love it. And I can't recreate it with analog.
No, you can't.
No. And I love those sounds. So, but I will because I'll use digital.
There you go. Over to the dark side.
It's all well lit for me.
All right.
Just a quick reminder to visit AnthonyMarinelliMusic.com to sign up to our mailing list. You'll get exclusive free content there and a chance to be part of our community. So looking forward to seeing you there. Back to the video. So what other kinds of sounds did you make? Like you said, you were emulating things that were on albums.
I really don't remember. I haven't used it in such a long time. Actually, the most fun we ever had with it was we threw a party and we invited guests. Do what you want. Do anything you like. And people that knew nothing were creating really interesting sounds that you would never have done, out of your own head, because they didn't know. They didn't know anything that they were doing.
Let's try it.
And it was very fun.
You're my guest.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm going to do anything interesting.
The party, well, you never know what a guest is going to do, do you?
Okay.
So I don't know what you're going to do.
Your preset.
And there's no right or wrong.
Uh-huh.
There's just doing or not doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So let's see what happens.
Oh my goodness.
Hopefully it's fun.
Yeah.
And I'll get you audio. Let's get you started there. So look, as simple as noise.
Yeah.
Now we can run noise through something.
Right.
And we have audio.
I have an idea of something
we can make this work.
Might want to try.
Right. So here's a mixer. This will be our output. So you can put anything you want in here and it's going to go to the output.
Okay.
And I got a trigger cable in case you want to play it from the keyboard.
All right, let's, I'm going to use the good oscillators.
There you go. And Mark said the good oscillators, these are like the later oscillators that were made after 1973, I believe, that are more stable and they're more like the mini Moog oscillators. They're the 921s. The 901s are the early oscillators from the late 60s, and they're a little bit unstable. They sound really good. I mean, this is a Moog in action. This is not digital. There are cables, and they fall on the floor.
That's what they do. You're supposed to have them around your neck.
Yeah, well,
there's a romantic thing about that, having a cup of coffee and
a cigarette, maybe.
No,
not the cigarette.
No cigarette. See, I'm just going to use 2 here.
There we go. Nicely tuned, right? They lock.
Okay. And then
it's all on you.
It's all on me. Okay. Here. I don't know if I'm going to be too ambitious about this. Oh, all right. I'm not even going to use the filter. Oh, and do you know about these, about how these invert?
Yes.
Okay, because if you go top to top, no inversion. Bottom to bottom, no inversion. But if you take them diagonally, you'll get inversion. It's not marked.
It's in my notes, though, but I got it from Rob.
Okay, good.
But thank you. Anything like that you remember is always useful.
You'll need a trigger cable. Or will
they'll automatically
trigger? Okay,
yeah, because I have them switched. That's part of the normal.
Okay, all 3 of them?
No, number 2 will go to number 2.
Oh, so
envelope 1 will go to VCA 1. Envelope 2 will go to VCA 2, and envelope 3.
Right, but what about the triggers?
It'll get a trigger.
It'll get a trigger. Okay,
but I'm just saying.
So I don't even need this.
No.
If I move here.
Yeah, just make sure if you go here, then it'll be the first envelope generator.
All right.
You need a little more length here.
Yay. Okay. So I'm going to do something fancy now.
Okay.
All right. Second envelope. Okay, second envelope's already in the VCA, but I'm going to take one of these ancient guys and go into the second VCA, and then come out and go. See, now I need an attenuator. That's one thing that these really had a dearth of. They didn't have enough attenuators.
Yeah, agreed.
You had to use mixers.
Yeah.
And there's like one lone attenuator.
Yeah.
Up there.
I plan on getting more attenuators.
Yeah. See, that's the beauty of the software ones. You just drag another attenuator onto the screen.
I know, but you work without it. You come up with a different sound.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that here. All right. All right, and where am I?
Here's your attenuator if you don't want so much vibrato.
So what's But what I'm trying to do is control the vibrato with this envelope. And it is. Okay.
Delayed vibrato.
Yeah.
There you go. You did it.
I did it. I got to make it a little faster.
Pretty nice.
There you go.
So just so you can see what happened here, right? 2 oscillators with delayed vibrato.
That's it.
10 minutes later.
Yep.
And that's part of the process of working on an analog synthesizer. But I think when you do that, Mark said something very interesting. You have to think.
You have to think. You have to keep track.
And maybe
what's doing what.
But maybe, vintage, modular, that's a benefit. It forces you to think. Because when you're working in digital, you could get a bit comatose. You could. You don't have to.
Well, if you were, for instance, using the software version of this, it's the exact same process, and you would have to think.
If you started from scratch?
Yeah, you would have to think.
So it would take just as long.
It might take just as long. And then after you were done, you could hit save.
Yeah, but you would just have to have the foresight to allow yourself to think and create the sound from scratch.
Right.
Because you could quickly call up a preset and be like, I'm going to be here all day making a sound as good as this. Mm-hmm. Right? And these are the mind things that you might want to initiate in your brain at least. Like, what value do I get from calling up the preset versus having to think and going through the process and building the sound? Mm-hmm. And then there's a trade-off there, but it's part of the creative process, and I think we have these choices now. And at the same time, like having an endless amount of attenuators and all these things sometimes can be a burden too, because you get this gigantic patch, right?
Oh, yes.
Which is a little bit like it's the same as this again. Mm-hmm. Go find out who's going where,
Absolutely.
So all part of the process, but this is fun. I think it's a good thing to see. And we're both very experienced on the instrument, and we all learn things, and we talk to each other and talk about that these outputs are inverted if you go diagonally, and they're not if you go horizontally, mm-hmm. and how does the filter coupler work? And we have these conversations because I guess it's like, drummers used to get together and talk about rudiments and things like that and feels. And mm-hmm. I played this groove with this cat, and it was like this Latin thing, but that had like an African beat mixed in with it, but it was on a pop song,
right.
And that's kind of how we talk about synthesizers, like our experiences, and pass it on. So we're here to pass it on because I think Mark and I both really believe in, if I can speak for myself, analog and digital. It's really all one thing. It's all about sound and music,
right.
and getting, it's the progression.
And the fun part about patching a modular synth is that you've got a sound in mind, and the sound you wind up with is going to be a journey to another place entirely. Unless you have to create something, but you're going to find something along the way that was probably even better than what you were intending to make.
In either format.
In any format, when you're starting from scratch and you're building a sound from the bottom up.
And the advantage in digital is if you get somewhere and you really love it and you want to push it one more notch, mm-hmm. you can save it.
You can save it.
But on this guy, you have to commit and you have to put it down.
Yeah.
If you don't print it, then you move on and you may never get it back again.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And it's not just the patch. When we are A/Bing the software with the hardware, and you have to do it with identical sounds, because if you move a knob 1/10 of a degree, it's another sound. You play it, nope, they sound different. And it could take 15 to 20 to 30 minutes just to match the sound before you can even do a test. And most people doing evaluations, comparing one plugin to another, they don't spend the time doing that.
Yeah.
And it's essential, because you're always going to hear a difference. Whether this one sounds better than the other is kind of immaterial. Oh, right. It sounds different, so therefore it's not as good.
Yeah.
And that's an unfair practice.
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to doing a shootout with you.
I am too. I'm shaking.
Guns drawn. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for showing up today. I loved hearing about the history of this beautiful piece of history, and still totally relevant synthesizer in my book for today's music. And interested to shoot it out with the digital emulations that you're making, and also looking forward to seeing what you do when you're free to not emulate and create,
Yeah, I'm working on
freely.
working on a couple of things in that direction too.
And hear the music that comes out of it.
I wish I had time. I'm going to force myself to have time to make music. Do you want to hear the end story with Mort?
Let's hear it.
Oh, okay. After I got this, I tried to contact Mort every year or so, whatever. First, I really tried hard to find him. I couldn't find him, didn't know where he was. And then on TV, in the middle of the night, here's this special on Mort Garson. It's on YouTube. You can find it. They did a little documentary on him.
Okay.
And it turns out his daughter owns a bakery in San Francisco. And the name of the bakery was there, whatever. I call her. I go, I've been trying to find your dad for like 20 years, And is he still around? He goes, yeah, he's like 82 or something like that. I go, I have his old Moog synthesizer, and I've always wanted to tell him that I've got it. So she gave me his phone number. I call it up. Mort answers the phone. Mort, I've got your old Moog. I go, oh, that thing? It was too big. My daughter bought me a Casio. that was, and then he died shortly after.
Oh.
But I finally did close the loop for full circle. And got back in contact with him, but boy, did I laugh.
Unbelievable.
That was the greatest comment.
It is the greatest comment coming from a person that was like one of the great pioneers of working with it. He was done with it.
Yeah, he was done. I really don't know how many years he had it before he sold it.
Yeah, but he produced on it, so I have no quarrels
Absolutely,
with that.
a lot of albums.
No quarrels with that.
A lot.
Like, more than most people's lifetime of electronic, beautiful, like long-lasting, music, including, one of the most popular pieces ever written on electronic instruments, Plantasia, Mother Earth's Plantasia.
Right.
Well, I'm looking forward to that shootout.
Me too.
I'll see you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Great to be here.